Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting for the City of Yuba City. First thing up on the agenda is roll call. Terrell.
Mayor Gill.
Here.
Vice Mayor Dukes.
Here.
Councilmember Buckland.
Here.
Councilmember Mon.
Here.
Councilmember Starkey.
Here.
Okay, great. We're going to have the invocation led by our Vice Mayor, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance with our Boy Scouts troop number 30 and 33. And Joel Gale will do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this day. We thank you, Lord, for this wonderful community that we live in and that as a council we represent. We pray that you would be with us tonight, that you would help us as we make decisions that affect the employees of our city and the citizens of our city. We ask that you would be here and bless and be with us tonight. We ask this in your most holy name. Amen.
Joel?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Joel. Okay, up on the agenda is presentations and proclamations. Right up, number one is Sutter Buttes Flood Control Flood Efforts Update, presentation by Mike Maney, Executive Director of Sutter Buttes Flood Control Agency. Welcome, Mike.
Good evening, Mayor Gill, members of the council, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to make a presentation on behalf of the agency. I'm joined by Director of Engineering, Michael Bissett.
Welcome, Michael.
So we're going to give an update basically on last year, accomplishments of last year, what we're planning this year, beginning with the recent advertisement for a $90 million construction project this week, and some of the challenges that we face in the coming year as well. Thank you. So I'll start with a little bit, spend just a few moments on background for those who are not, heavily involved with the project. Programs and projects that we're involved in that you're hearing your constituents are involved with. 2013 highlights, 2014 objectives and challenges, and we'll have some time for some questions. So, the basin for which the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency has responsibility for is bordered by the Cherokee Canal to the north, Feather River on the east, Sutter Buttes and the Sutter Bypass in the west and southwest. It's about 300 square miles, $7 billion worth of damageable assets by the Corps of Engineers estimate, and about 95,000 people. The need for the projects, and there's our series of projects, and we'll describe the biggest, most visible construction project we're embarked on right now, our public safety, to reduce the economic impacts to this community due to FEMA floodplain mapping, and to comply with SB 5, which is a new bill that was passed in 2007. Now, when the assessment district was formed in 2010, we stated our goals were to get 200-year protection for the communities of Biggs, Gridley, Live Oak, and the majority of Yuba City, and get 100-year protection for the remainder in the basin in the south. None of that has changed, and we've just started construction this year to get that 200-year protection for the north. So there's three major programs you're hearing about if you're not directly involved with them. The Feather River West Levee project, that's the most visible design and construction project. We just broke ground this year, last summer. And that is the first of a series of contracts that will result in the completion of about 35 miles of repairs to the west levee of the Feather River. It's important to note that this is a locally led project. It's funded 25% local, 75% state bond 1E monies, but it's locally led by your communities, by your leadership, by leadership from members of this council, as well as Biggs, Gridley, Live Oak, Sutter County, Butte County, LD1 and LD9. The Sutter Basin Feasibility Study is a core federal project. It's led by the Corps of Engineers, It's funded by state, local, federal cost shares. The importance to the basin is that it does some stuff that the state is not going to fund, and that's just sort of the bottom line. There's been a lot of frustration associated with Corps projects in the past. This project is on its way to getting federal authorization, appropriation, and it may very well result in some hardcore construction about the time we're winding down with the Feather River West Levee project, which concludes in 2016. So it's important to us. It's not a background activity anymore. It's something. It's a major project that's going to contribute to the safety of the basin, including Yuba City. The Feather River Regional Flood Management Plan is a locally led project, but unlike the Feather River West Levee project, it's a partnership between Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority, Marysville Levee Commission, and Yuba County Water Agency. Sabufka is one of 4 partners in this effort to prioritize projects on both sides of the Feather River, extending from Thermalito in the north down to the confluence in the south, both sides of the river. So we're in partnership to prioritize how we want to manage flood risk in the basin. That includes both sides of the Feather River. And that is a state-funded project, 100% state funding, but again, it's a locally led project. It's a little unusual because it's part of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, which is a state plan, but the state made the decision to hand over this planning effort to partnerships like the one that's formed for the Feather River. So I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Michael Bissett, who will talk a little bit more detail about the Feather River West Levee project.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. My name is Michael Bissett. I'm the Director of Engineering for the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency. So it's my pleasure tonight to give the council an update on our Feather River West Levee project. Just quickly to talk about the project in general, it's 35 miles of levee repairs. We broke the project up into the different color areas you can see on the map here. So starting up in the north is our project area D. In the yellow is our project area C. That's the area that's currently in construction. And then project area B is the blue area. So those are 3 components make up Feather River West Levee Project 1. And then the red component way down in the south, that's the next phase. So that's in the future. Right now we're in design and construction of Feather River West Levee 1, so B, C, and D. The majority of our project, like I said, it's 35 miles of levee repairs. The majority is 27 miles of slurry wall construction, the remainder being seepage berms and relief wells. Those are the primary tools that we're using to correct the deficiencies of the levees that we have along the Feather River. Our goal, as Mike stated, 200-year level of flood protection for the urban areas and 100-year in the South Basin where you have the deep flooding potential. We broke our project into 3 phases, B, C, and D, and we did a risk prioritization on how to implement those projects. So essentially, we evaluated the different areas, and essentially people and property were the primary risk-based decision makers of how we roll these projects out. And we also looked at project logistics, such as real estate acquisition, utility relocations, other types of components that go into making a project happen. So that's how Project Area C became the first construction project out the door, which started last year. Total project cost, $280 million. That's cost shared with the state and the locals at a 76-24 breakdown. And ultimately, we'll get federal dollars into our program through one of the studies, as Mike talked about. So quickly, to talk about last year, a very successful year for Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency. We were able to begin construction on Project Area C in 2013, as was promised back in 2010 when the assessment district was passed. We were very happy to make that goal a reality. A lot went into being able to allow us to begin construction. We had to have all our environmental documentation completed. We had to get our regulatory approvals and permits, and most importantly, we had to get our 408 permit approval from the Army Corps. And that was really the long lead item, and that's what caused a delay. And when we started our construction in 2013, we weren't able to start in April, which is ultimately the best time to start levee construction. We were delayed into July, and that's when the Army Corps ultimately approved our permit. Therefore, we were only able to build in the Shanghai Bend area of Yuba City. So we completed 1.5 miles of levee improvements in 2013. We had contractor working. We had 3 deep soil mixing rigs that are shown on the slide here. That equipment was operating 24 hours a day, 6 days a week in order to complete that 1.5 miles, because we had very deep slurry wall construction that had to take place in that area. And as many people know, that's the site of the 1955 break. So really it was high on our priority list, and we got that work done in 2013. Also, we were able to complete designs, essentially complete the designs for project areas B and D. We were able to get those approved through our partner agencies, the Army Corps, Department of Water Resources, and our independent panel of experts. So we were able to wrap those documents up and get them ready to go out to bid. Lastly, on the feasibility study with the Army Corps, we hit a major milestone, which is the last bullet, the Civil Works Review Board. So that was that review board was in Washington, D.C. Of the Army Corps, their review board. They ultimately approved our study and authorized their staff to take it to completion and turn it into a chief's report, which goes to Congress. So it was a major milestone in the many years that it took to get it to that point. So very successful outcome. So launching into 2014. We have a lot of objectives that we're looking to complete, and I wanted to highlight some of those tonight. So Project Area C, which we started last year, we're going to complete that project this year. So that's another 13 miles of levee construction that will be completed in 2014. So we're ready to begin construction as soon as the Central Valley Flood Protection Board allows us to, which is typically April 15th. Given the unfortunate drought conditions, there's a chance we may be able to start our work sooner. So that would be maybe a positive outcome of a bad situation. For project areas B and D, I'm very happy to let the council know that we are officially out to bid. We were out to bid yesterday. That was our first day. We plan to open bids on March 4th, which is, right around the corner. So we're quickly moving those project areas forward also. We're going to hold a mandatory pre-bid meeting next week here in these chambers. We already have 10 plan holders for this project, so we're looking forward to receiving our bids on March 4th. We'll be taking a construction contract to the Sabufka board in March and awarding contracts and quickly getting into construction for those projects. So 2014 is going to be a very busy year for this region. We're going to have work occurring in project areas B, C, and D. We're going to have a lot of equipment out there, many headings, many miles of levee are going to be worked on at the same time. So it's going to be a very busy year, very successful year. Also, in 2014, that's when we're going to complete the feasibility study, now that the Civil Works Review Board authorized the completion, turning it into a chief's report. That is quickly moving forward. So Mike and I are meeting with the Army Corps almost weekly now. We're going to start that constant engagement. They have staff in D.C. now working on completing the document, and we're looking forward to finishing that up this summer and then sending it off to Congress for authorization. Then lastly, on the regional study, that project is also set for completion in 2014. So that will set the stage for Sabufka, along with other water flood control agencies, putting their markers in place with the Department of Water Resources, outlining what their projects are, prioritizing those projects, and then trying to compete for money as best that we can. So we have a lot of activities going on, and we're looking forward to a very successful year. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike to close up. So thank you very much.
Before Mike starts, through the mayor?
Sure.
I have a couple of questions for you, Mike. You said that we finished a mile and a half from Shanghai Bend. Were we able to connect into the section of Yuba City that was repaired previously? So is this area protected all the way up to north of the city?
Yes, we connected to the existing wall on the north of the Shanghai Bend levee and then on the south also.
All right, and just for the public's benefit, you mentioned slurry walls, relief wells, and the berms. Could you explain what those are so that the public understands what it is this project is entailing?
Absolutely, thank you. It's something we talk about all the time, so yeah, I tend to lose that perspective. So slurry walls are, they can be constructed in several different ways, but they're essentially a 3-foot wide wall that is constructed typically through the center of the levee down to a clay layer of soil, and it provides a barrier for water from passing through or underneath the levee. And they're typically built with a bentonite, which is a clay material, and the existing soil and water. So you have almost like a semi-rigid wall that would be underneath the levee. And what I showed earlier with the deep soil mixing machines, if the walls have to go really deep, you can use those machines, and they're almost like paddles, and they mix the materials together, and it's you can also use cement in those type of walls. So it depends on the nature of the geotechnical conditions, but those are slurry walls. So another way to help remediate deficiencies from underseepage is the construction of relief wells. And as the water, if you don't have any protection, the water can build a lot of pressure as it moves through and underneath levees. And if it has enough pressure, it starts moving material, and that's what causes boils on the land side, ultimately can lead to levee failure. So the relief wells, they take the pressure out, they discharge that water in a controlled manner, and that's another method of providing relief to a levee system. Lastly, on the seepage berms is essentially earthen structures on the land side of a levee that provides enough protection, and it knocks down the head of the water that goes underneath the levee, and it dissipates it enough of the energy of that water, and it doesn't cause problems. So those are 3 types of methods that you can use to solve the problems that we have now.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Mike and Michael, thank you guys very, very much. I think
I think Mike's got one
Mike's
last
gonna wrap it
slide.
up? Okay.
I apologize. I'll make it very fast. This is the last slide.
That's fine. One of the things that I did want to point Mike as well, and I think for the general public, is about 3 years ago, nobody knew what this levee project was, especially the Sutter Basin. And having been back in Washington, D.C. with lobbying efforts, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Office of Budget Management, and pretty much a lot of the members of Congress all know about the Sutter Basin levee project, simply for the fact because of this community getting behind it and passing our local share of the tax. Without that, we probably would have not been in line for the 1E funds. And because of our community's efforts, we're able to finally, for once and all, fix 44 miles of this levee. And had we not been able to pass this, Yuba City would have been declared in a flood zone area, which means for the rest of the umpteen 30 years, we would have been paying FEMA premiums for flood insurance. And this community would have probably come to a screeching halt. So we literally were racing against time. And I think the efforts of this community, efforts of the Sutter Buttes Flood Agency and all the board members were able to move this thing along. And now, with almost $90 million of bid work going out, that's huge for this area. And our goal was to try to get this done local as possible. And hopefully with the economies of scale, because it's a large enough project that it'll probably come way under budget. So.
Thank you, Mayor Gill. I just wanted to point out some challenges that we're going to be facing. So we painted I wouldn't say a rosy picture, but a picture of some successes and some tall order for the remaining 33 and a half miles of repairs that are going to be ongoing in 2 years. These are the challenges that we'll be facing. And as in the past, as you pointed out, Mayor Gill, the leadership of members of this council who sit on the Sabufka board, as well as the council itself and the community, paid big dividends when we go back to D.C. It's extremely important when groups like NGOs, like this council, like the many communities, the Taxpayers Association wrote a letter. It makes a big deal when that kind of support shows up in D.C. and people pay attention. So it's a real credit to the community. Now, some of the challenges, state funding. So we've got, the state has funded design and permitting to date. One would think that funding of construction, particularly when you're out to bid, would be a slam dunk, but it's a very slow process. And so we're working with the state basically to get through what is literally a process to make sure the funding continues to flow and that we don't have any hiccups. So we expect to be successful, and where we don't expect to be successful, we have other ways of demanding that kind of continuance of funding for what's a very important project to the region. Right-of-way is always on the critical path. Acquisition of right-of-way is so important to a linear project like this, and thus far the agency has been successful in acquiring right-of-way so construction can move forward in a logical and straightforward pattern. We talked about the feasibility study. That's really one step in what is a long federal process. So it's just a planning report. It takes an act of Congress to authorize the project. It takes another act of Congress to get appropriations, and then the whole Corps of Engineers process starts with hardcore design and construction. We benefit from the fact that WRDA, the Water Resources Development Act, this bill that's in conference committee, it may be one of the shining lights of true bipartisanship in Washington, D.C., and it so happens that the timing of our feasibility study meets that criteria so far to be authorized. We don't know what's going to come out of conference committee in D.C., but things look about as good as they could be in terms of timing. The urban level of protection is something that folks are going to be start talking about, and actually we're working with your staff right now to address. And these are the requirements that came out of the Senate Bill 5 back in 2007. And the reason they start kicking in is because communities like Yuba City have to start thinking about general plan amendments that are due in 2015. So we've been working closely with your staff to make sure that those deadlines are met and that the project will meet all of the requirements for 200-year level of flood protection. And finally, FEMA changes. That's one of the big impacts so far, as you pointed out, Mayor Gill, and I just reemphasize that but for this project or the impending funding of this project way back in 2010, FEMA has held off mapping this region into the floodplain. But for this project, much of this area, including all of Yuba City, would be paying the high insurance rates because we all know that we don't meet 100-year criteria. We'd be paying those high insurance rates. And so, so far, FEMA has been held at bay, and now with real construction happening, there's no reason for FEMA to come in, and we've been able to delay that floodplain mapping. Those are the challenges. That's my last slide. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to respond to them.
Questions for Mike?
Yeah, through the mayor. Mike, we started on segment B, and then, segment C, and then we're starting on segment C and D. Is segment A part of this year 2015, or is that a separate project?
That's a great question. So C is the area right adjacent to Yuba City. B is immediately south of Shanghai Bend to Star Bend, and then D is everything north to Thermalito. A is the area south from the confluence in the south, confluence with the Sutter Bypass to Star Bend. So that area is in the planning phases right now. That's the levee that protects largely the rural areas of the deep floodplain in the south. Frankly, the state would not fund south. They had some reservations about funding to the south. as it's our goal to do that, and we've set aside budget to repair that south, but we can only do it leveraging state monies to do that. So we'd have a project that's with the Department of Water Resources right now to start work on that as early as 2015, right about the time we're winding down work here. So that work is ongoing. That's slated for 2015 to complete protections to south of Laurel Avenue in the south. Moreover, the federal feasibility study just confirmed that there's a federal interest in repairing that. So it's very possible, it's hard to believe, but it's very possible that the federal government may actually come in with a contractor and do the portions that the state will not do.
That's not guaranteed right now as far as...
No, we have to go through the authorization appropriation process.
Doesn't if the portions of the levee in Project A is damaged, doesn't that backflow to Yuba City?
So the southern portion, so water ponds in the south, and if it's allowed to pond all the way back into Yuba City, it does hit the southern sphere of influence of Yuba City. Now, in the past, in fact, in the 55 flood event, and as in typical flood events, in fact, this happened in Meridian as recently as 1997. Typically, a flood fight involves breaching a levee to relieve ponding, so that doesn't happen. The reason I bring this up is because we're fronting a proposal to preposition a breach of that southern bypass while we're repairing the levees to provide protection to the south part of the basin, but as a backup plan to have a relief structure in the south so that this kind of ponding the effects of ponding in the south would be minimal to Yuba City in the event of a flood fight.
If Project A doesn't happen, do the residences in the South Yuba City, would their flood insurance, would they have to get flood insurance? Are they still in the 100-year floodplain?
Right. So what happens is the assessment district was set up so that, as we said, we're shooting for 200-year protection in the north and 100-year protection in the south. There's a portion of Yuba City that are paying, the southwest corner of Yuba City, they're paying less assessment because they're getting 100-year protection to get out of the FEMA floodplain. And so we're working to get 100-year protection through the federal project and through the state of California to ring around the basin. And that's ongoing right now. We just don't have the funding to start construction until about 2015.
And it would actually take Project A and the federal project of the bypass to get 200 a year?
The bypass, okay, under state law, the bypass, and this has not changed. When the assessment district was formed in 2010, the bypass is the obligation of the state under Water Code 8361 to fix the bypass. Now, the issue with that is that even though it's, state law that the state's supposed to come in and fix that, that's not their priority. There's existing bond funding, and it may be a while before the state funds the repair of the Sutter bypass. And so right now we're looking at what we can do locally with existing local funds and existing bond funds to provide protection for that southwest corner so nobody's paying flood insurance. It's a complicated topic because the state's obligated to do that, and just like all public agencies, they will tell you, yes, we're obligated to do that, that's under the law, but they have other priorities.
Thanks, Mike.
Other questions for Mike?
I just have a comment for him and his staff. I went down and walked a portion of the levee this morning at Shanghai Bend, and I will, and I really think that this is important for the public to understand that as all of that construction moved through there was minimal impact left behind through the project, with the exception of a levee repair, meaning that all of the homes down there, not a lot of complaints from the homeowners. They went through this process all the way to the yard that they put together, that they used, has all been cleaned up, put back together. The levee's been repaved on top. It's just an amazing project and just a quality project
and they were still down working on it this morning to smooth out the kind of the final edges of it, it appeared. So I just really want to point out to individuals, especially when we talk about right-of-way and moving, further north, that even though that the impact will be for, potentially months moving through an area, that it's a quality project that's taking place. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mike. Item number 2 is public hearings. Yuba City Lighting and Landscape Maintenance District Number 1, Zone of Benefit B1, presented by Diane. Welcome.
Good evening. In January, we brought before you the request for inclusion of a parcel on Garden Highway into Lighting and Landscape Maintenance District B1. This was a condition of approval of a parcel map to split the property. The applicant submitted the request to be included, and so the item tonight is for the public hearing and to adopt the resolution confirming the diagram and assessment to levy the assessment. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Diane? Okay, if not, I'll go ahead and open it up for a public hearing for consideration. Anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this item may do so. Seeing that there is no mad rush to the podium, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back for a recommendation from the council.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next up is public communication. You are welcome and encouraged to participate in this meeting. Public comment is taken on items listed on the agenda when they are called. Public comments on items not listed on the agenda will be heard at this time. Comments on controversial items may be limited, and large groups are encouraged to select a representative to express the opinion of the group. Number 3, written requests. Members of the public submitting written requests at least 24 hours prior to the meeting may normally be allotted 5 minutes to speak. Terrell, is there any written requests?
No requests were received.
Okay. Item number 4, appearance of interested citizens. Members of the public may address the City Council on items of interest that are within the city's jurisdiction. Individuals addressing general comments are encouraged to limit their statements to 3 minutes. Anyone from the public wish to come to the podium and comment on any items that are not on the agenda? Okay. Moving on to consent calendar. All matters listed in the consent calendar are considered to be routine and can be acted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time that the council votes on the motion unless members of the City Council, staff, or public request specific items to be discussed or removed from the consent calendar for an individual action. Would anybody like on the council to have this item removed?
No.
Okay. Anybody from the public? Not?
Move to approve.
Got a motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Item number 6, Natalie, CalPERS employer paid member contribution resolutions.
I'm unpacking. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight I'm requesting that you adopt resolutions that reflect the CalPERS benefits that our bargaining units have agreed to and that they are receiving. Through past negotiations, the city has bargained to pay the employer's share of retirement contributions. This is commonly referred to as employer-paid member contributions, or EPMC. There are 2 categories our employees fall into. There's the category that's reflected, number 1, which is reflected in this table 1 here, where the city is shows the bargaining units that the city is paying all or a portion of their member contribution. So there's 3 bargaining units that fall into this category. Table 2 shows the second category that the city has with its bargaining units. These are the bargaining units that the city is paying and reporting. So not only are they paying, they're reporting the value of employer-paid member contribution. So when you pay and report the value of EPMC to CalPERS, this results in an increase. It increases the members' compensation, to CalPERS. So we have the remaining bargaining units here, and this includes the executive team. as well. So this evening, approving these resolutions, the point of this is that our resolutions with CalPERS do not currently reflect what we have prior negotiated with the bargaining units. You can see there were some changes in 2010 from this slide and in Table 1. These were, in 2010, those were prior negotiated contracts in previous years. So those weren't actually happening in 2010 negotiated contracts, those were happening in previous years that we were implementing in those years. A lot of these things were staged increases over time because of the bargaining unit contracts. So at this point, this is basically a cleanup item with CalPERS to make sure our resolutions match our contracts with the bargaining units. One thing I would like to note is that there are no changes to the bargaining unit contracts being done. There are no changes in how we're reporting and paying these contributions to CalPERS, and there's no policy decision on the table tonight. Purely, if you will, housekeeping. So I'll entertain any questions that you have.
Questions from the council for Natalie at this point in time? Okay. Not, what's the pleasure of the council?
I'll move for approval of the item.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 7, 2013 Homeland Security Grant Program presented by Lincoln Eden, Police Commander. And congratulations, Mr. Eden.
Commander Eden.
Yes, Commander Eden.
God, we have to call him Commander now. Gee.
Quite a title there.
Thank you, Mayor Gill, Vice Mayor Dukes, and council members and members of the public. It's good to see our scouts here today. I truly believe these are our future leaders in our communities, and I commend you guys for being here. What you have before you is our Homeland Security Grant, acceptance of a Homeland Security Grant of $23,167, which staff at the police department has identified to the purchase of 2 all-terrain vehicles, which will be used mainly by patrol officers, first responders, and for emergencies and responding to, and better equip ourselves to respond to emergencies in the Feather River Parkway, as well as to be used for potentially special events, as in the Sikh Parade or any other events that we have identified where there used to be of significance and to our staff and to the community members, the members in our community that attend these events. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that...
Commissioner. Yeah, sure.
When we're looking at these vehicles, are these road legal vehicles, or are they strictly an off-road vehicle? I know that Polaris has a couple models that can be operated on the road legally. So I'm wondering what you're looking at.
It's still in research, still looking, but more than likely it's going to be off-road.
Okay. And do you have the trailer equipment and everything to be able to move these to off-site locations then?
Do we have that now?
Correct.
I do not believe so. I don't believe they can be trailered using what we existing have, I think, for our motorcycles.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? What's the recommendation of the council?
Move to approve.
Okay. Got a motion?
I'll second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Have some fun.
Item number 8, professional services agreement with Bennett Engineering Services for engineering services for Garden Highway Improvement Project, Winship Road to Lincoln Road. Diana.
So in 2010, the city received a $680,000 through SACOG through the Bicycle and Pedestrian Funding Program to install 6-foot paved bike lanes and sidewalks on Garden Highway between Winship Road and Lincoln Road. In November of 2013, came before council and provided 3 different alternative concepts for the widening project, in which council proceeded forward with alternative 2, which was utilizing the existing right-of-way to provide 1 paved traveling each direction, a 9-foot continuous left turn lane with the bike lanes and curb gutter and sidewalk. So the next step for the project was to hire an engineering firm for the design in coordination with Caltrans. This project is funded through federal funds, CMAQ funds, which are Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Funds. There's a lot of strings attached to those funds in terms of the process that you have to go through with Caltrans to get approval with their right-of-way certification, utility coordination. And so based upon that, staff sent the RFP to 3 engineering firms and received 2 proposals back. After the review of the proposal, staff is recommending award of a professional services agreement to Bennett Engineering of Roseville in the amount of $140,461. And there was also at the November workshop a discussion about public utility easement on the west side of Garden Highway. I've sent letters out to the property owners. I've received some feedback from the property owners, and so I'm going to go through the process of continuing to try to contact the property owners that I've not heard from yet. So with that, the project is funded, like I said, through CMAQ funds, with the additional funds coming from developer impact fees.
Great, thank you, Diana. Any questions for Diana at this point in time? I do have Pat Miller who wishes to speak on this item.
Thank you for the opportunity to address this issue. In looking at this, there's a $47,000 difference in the 2 bids that were received, and the recommendation is to go with the high bid. And the reasoning was because MHM's proposal was not as comprehensive, and I'd like to know, what was included in that, because what I see, MHM is a local firm, number one, and Bennett is Roseville, out of area, and the difference in cost is significant. And so I'm just real curious, because it's all taxpayer money. I don't care where it comes from, federal, state, or local. So $47,000 of taxpayer money, does it really need to be spent? Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. You want to answer that, please?
Sure, I can address that. Bennett Engineering allocated about 50% more hours to this project than MHM. They included geotechnical investigation work, the environmental work associated. We have to go through not only the California environmental process, but the federal environmental process as well. So they had a consultant, Bennett had a consultant associated with that was included more work than MHM's proposal. It was really based upon the number of hours. The project manager for Bennett Engineering, Trin Campos, who's here in the audience, local Yuba City resident, 22-year employee of Caltrans, very familiar with the Caltrans process. And because this project is so important to the city and the deadlines associated with the CMAQ funding and the fact that we need to have a seamless project through Caltrans, MHM does have some experience with this process, but not directly related to a street improvement project of this nature. And so they've developed utility coordination agreements and things like that, but not the same type as what's associated with this project. And so based upon all of these factors, we felt it was important to award to Bennett Engineering. With SACOG, it's important that you spend the funds that you receive and you meet the deadlines that you're given. And Bennett's proposal provided the schedule as to how they're going to do that, and like I said, allocated almost 50% more hours to this project.
Great, thank you.
Through the mayor.
Yes.
So, Diane, was your concern that with the MHM engineering that you would be having to come back and spend more later, time and money?
My concern was that it may not be fully comprehensive to meet Caltrans requirements, and my concern was that without the full understanding of the Caltrans process, would they be able to meet the schedule that's required for this project?
Because I had the same concern when I reviewed this report as Mrs. Miller, and wouldn't they be responsible? I guess the money part, they would probably be responsible since they bid it, but your concern is more on the timing, and we have to spend the $680,000 from SACOG by a certain deadline. That's the concern.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just a comment, and that is meeting the SACOG deadlines is imperative to this project, and making it move forward and making sure that we have a contract that gets us there is certainly one of the most important concepts of this, and I think the money is being well spent by Bennett to move this project forward in a very expeditious manner.
And I'll echo the same thing. And, you know, a lot of the bids that do come back at the council, we do take a look at as a low bidder. And a lot of times when we look at these bids, it's always looking across, and that's our number one thing. Are we picking somebody who's here in Yuba City? And a lot of times we do want to pick somebody here in Yuba City. A lot of times you can't pick somebody here in Yuba City. And when you look at this bid with Diane talking about it, it is more hours, it is more in depth, it is more in detail as far as what we want to do. So when you're looking at dollars for dollars, yeah, you can come back and say one's higher, one's lower. But when you look at the work that's coming into this project, one's more detailed than the other. And I think if we want to do this, we're going to do it right the first time. So, any other questions?
It seems to be pretty reasonable to me. Thank you, Diana.
One last question. So the total cost, I mean, we're not sure exactly until the bids come out, but roughly in a range of about $1 million, and of that $1 million, 680 is coming from SACOG, right?
Yes.
Thanks.
I also want to note this is a not-to-exceed contract, and we'll be trying as hard as we can to be as frugal with the money that we can, and we were not going to expend any more hours than what's necessary to complete the project.
So it could cost as little, or...
You know, the benefit of having an ex-Caltrans employee is that as we're going through the process, there may be things that we can do with Caltrans to minimize some of the effort that's required, because they know the people that are there and they know the process.
In other words, we may not spend the entire $140,000.
It's hopeful that we won't.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Can I get a
The
motion?
Mayor, I'd move the recommendation.
Okay, I got a motion
I'll second that.
and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Item number 9 is a Plumas Street Boulevard and Town Square Drive Improvement Plans and Specifications presented by Manu Dhaliwal.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Manu Dhaliwal, Assistant Engineer with Public Works. Today I'm here to talk about certain improvements for Plumas Boulevard and Town Square. The purpose of this project is to improve safety at the intersection of Plumas Boulevard and Town Square. And the background is we've received numerous complaints about near misses and accidents at this location. Within the past 3 years, we have 3 recorded collisions and numerous unrecorded collisions. We don't have any figures on property damage caused by people there. The intersection has medical centers on both sides of it, with the Town Square on the southeast corner. It's a park, fountain. You often see kids there. Currently, there is not a crosswalk going east-west across the median, and there is not a stop sign coming out of Town Square. So one of the recommendations is to add a stop sign coming out of Town Square and to put in a crosswalk going east-west. The intersection receives steady traffic during the day from patients, people in wheelchairs, elderly, also the employees moving from one center to another. The recommended project scope, after looking at multiple alternatives, is the replacement of the existing curb ramps with ADA compliant curb ramps, the installation of crosswalk striping, yield signs in the center of the median. One of the problems we had at this intersection was people making lefts into Town Square and lefts out of Town Square. We're doing it in a single movement, meaning they would pull out and directly go into the southbound lane or into Town Square without properly yielding in the center of the median to oncoming traffic. So that was one of the major issues. And so we believe that putting yield markings in the center would help mitigate that, to change it from one movement to 2 movements. The installation of in-ground flashing lights and flashing pedestrian signs on the crosswalk going across Plumas Boulevard. Now that would be two separate actuators, so it would be separate on the east side and separate on the west side, so you wouldn't have someone hitting a button on the east and having the entire crosswalk flashing. It would be one side at a time. The main reason is if someone's going across and they're going south down the median, you don't want to stop traffic on both sides. And I guess I can talk about some of the alternatives that we thought of as well. One of the major alternatives that we discussed was extending the median to close that from left turns. And in the case of extending the median, we would still be doing the 5 curb ramps, still be doing the stop signs on Town Square, and still be doing the striping across. And in that case, we would still want either the pedestrian flashing lights or the in-ground flashing lights, mainly because of sight distance issues when people are crossing that the intersection. Because there's parking on both sides of the median, you usually cannot see a pedestrian. Like if you're coming north, you cannot see a pedestrian until he's almost 4 feet into the intersection because of the cars that are parked on the median. That's not safe. We need some way of signaling that someone's crossing. So that's the point of the pedestrian flashing lights or in-ground flashing lights. So the pros of that are you eliminate the cross-intersection traffic, and there would be more parking because you would be allowed to park on the extended median. The cons are that the parked vehicles limit line of sight, so you would have to, once again, put in that pedestrian flashing to give some indication of pedestrians. And also that you would be limiting access. Another option, another alternative, was a 3-way stop. I don't have a slide for that, but it would be the intersection with stop signs. That option was not recommended, mainly because it's about 200 feet to the next stop sign and 200 feet to the one before, and that would really restrict the flow of traffic, considering about 5,000 vehicles travel on Plumas Boulevard and only about 100 on Town Square. So you would be severely restricting traffic on Plumas Boulevard for the sake of a much smaller traffic volume. Another option, could you go back one? Sorry. Another option was, instead of the in-ground flashing and pedestrians, was to use what's called a pedestrian hawk. And it's essentially a signal, but for pedestrians. So the pros to that are it's one of the more effective measures for pedestrian traffic control. The cons are that it's more expensive by about $10,000, and the aesthetics of it probably would not match what we have currently in Plumas Boulevard. And also the existing landscaping, the trees, would make it difficult. And so if we went ahead with the recommended proposal, our anticipated schedule would be to award in March, early March, start in late March, and complete it by the end of June. The fiscal impact is about $65,000. The funding for the curb ramps would come from our community development block grant funds, roughly $30,000, with the remainder coming from, well, we would need an appropriation of unallocated road funds at the time of award into the project account. Any questions?
Through the mayor.
Yes. Questions?
I have a question and then a comment. Regarding the ramps, can you explain to me, there's currently ramps there.
Yes.
And they don't meet the ADA standards. What's the difference between the new ramps and the existing ramps?
The difference would be the cross slopes. ADA has very strict standards on the slope of the ramp going in, the slope of the ramp on the sides. Also, they have standards on, you now have to put in truncated domes, which you've probably seen on Plymouth Street, a bit further north. Those are the major differences. The reason that we would be doing these is because, well, two reasons. Pretty much whenever alterations are made to the pedestrian circulation path, we're required to update the ramps to the maximum ADA requirements. And the second reason is because of the volume of disabled or wheelchair-bound people that travel in this vicinity. We feel it's important to keep the ramps up to the highest standard.
All right. It just always sticks in my craw that we have ramps there, that we have to tear out ramps to put new ramps in. But I understand that it is a requirement to do that. My recommendation, after looking at the options that were put before us, I would recommend that we close the median. There we go. Because actually, when you look at the numbers, like you said, there's nearly 5,000 trips a day on Plymouth Street versus 113 on Town Square. For the safety issue here, I think it's warranted that we just close that off, that it's not going to make that big of an impact to the traffic on Town Square.
Oh, I should also mention that the estimate I have for closing it is about 110,000 versus the 65.
Right.
It's about 40 something. Yes, go
To the
ahead.
mayor. I'm not shooting the messenger by any stretch of the imagination here. How I see the proposal, the first proposal, is just 75% of a bad decision that was made years ago at the intersection of Franklin and Plymouth Boulevard. The only thing that lacks is the fourth leg off of this. The real estate here is a very large amount of area. It does slow the traffic pattern down in that area, and I'm concerned with simply putting yield bars out in the center. I think half the folks will think it's a trolley stop, and the others may not know what they're supposed to be doing in their movements. Certainly, closing the median does allow for a more smooth transition and less conflict with the pedestrians. We have faced litigation on pedestrian crossings in the past, and certainly I think that this would be one of those steps that would lessen the amount of auto pedestrian conflict, would be closing that median, and that's what I would be in support of.
Through the mayor.
Yes.
So you were saying now that when you do close the median, then that's going to create more parking along that area that you're closing off,
Correct.
which will hamper sight for drivers and pedestrians, so the flashing yellow is going to save them, huh?
We would need the flashing yellow regardless because traveling from the median east, you already have limited sight distance. Vehicles are always parked there. Even when I went out there to do my points and take my GPS, I mean, you have to walk out pretty much to where the vehicle's parked before you can see someone and before they can see you. So
Okay.
that's going to be something that's going to be necessary.
If you did
regardless.
the median and closed it all off, you're still going to be doing all the crosswalks and the ramps and everything else.
Correct.
So we're going to spend an extra $50,000 to close that off. We could do what we talked about initially without closing it off initially, since all that stuff's going to be done. And then we could always close the median off at a later date, I suspect.
That's correct.
If we find that it's a huge problem.
Right. That is a possibility.
$50,000 is $50,000. I mean, you know.
But I have a question for you, and you mentioned earlier that studies showed you had 3 accidents within last year recorded.
Within the last 3 years.
3 accidents in the last 3 years?
Yes.
Okay. And you have some that were unrecorded. It would seem like for $110,000 that there's other areas in town that have a lot more accidents than this particular place does. So I don't mean to, like Councilmember Buckland said, I don't mean to shoot the messenger, but I don't know where this thing can be such a priority for us to spend $110,000 on a crossing when we've only had 3 car accidents in the last 3 years.
Most of it's from complaints that we have received. We have signatures from the medical offices around there. Essentially, they receive a lot of complaints from their patients that they don't feel safe crossing it. So that was the major...
So it's a crosswalk issue, not really a, an issue for accidents, I guess. I'm trying to figure out. I mean, we've got our assistant chief here, and we've got our police commander here that can probably tell us that there's a lot more areas in Yuba City that are high prone to accidents, could probably use stop signs or other warning signs than, spending $110,000, to put a median in and put crosswalks with flashing things. We did the same thing on Stabler Road at the request of, parents and students, and I drive Stabler Road 2-3 times a day. I hardly see those lights flashing anymore. So, I mean, we did that, which is wonderful for pedestrian crossing, but I just don't see here with 3 accidents in the last 3 years.
The Mayor, those 3 accidents could also be due to the fact that there was no stop sign. I mean, you got 2 street intersections. It's very rare to not have a stop sign.
Right. That's...
First, the easiest solution is putting a stop sign so people aren't pulling into a street without having to stop.
Right. That's definitely one of the recommendations for their end.
That's the cheapest solution, and then add, like Councilman at the end said.
That would be me, Starkey. Yeah, fine.
When you turn 50, you start forgetting names.
Yeah, wait till you're 60, pal.
Yeah, this work wears you out.
Yeah.
We could always do these in phases instead of spending over $100,000 on this slightly traveled, especially that side street that is very rarely traveled, a couple of hundred vehicles. That you could start with a stop sign, then these crosswalks, and then if we still have an accident, maybe put that barrier in there instead of going out and spending, like they said, we certainly have a lot. We have limited resources.
Right.
To the Mayor?
Yes.
Quite honestly, I've been doing exhaustive studies in this area for the last 6 to 8 months, going to the coffee shop right across from the crosswalks, and I am there for about 45 minutes in the morning and notice that there's a lot of people that use these crosswalks. Elderly, people have their walkers, and I know they're just excited about going over those little bumps with their walkers. They're getting ready for that. But and then oftentimes we see some of the staff people cutting across, and so if we had some defined crosswalks, I think that would be helpful. The speed of the vehicles coming along Plymouth Street, they get to going pretty good, and with the yellow flashing lights, I think that would help from a safety standpoint, definitely. So I would be in favor of the crosswalk and the stop sign there on the northeast corner. And then at some point down the road, if the median makes sense, then, and we're just fat with money, then we can go ahead and do that.
Is that a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll second that, which is pretty much staff's recommendation.
Right.
Right.
I have a couple of comments and a consideration to be made here. When we talk about the town square, that could be made to be a right-hand turn only. Am I correct?
Yes, it could.
That would eliminate approximately 25% of the conflict traffic that would be occurring out there. It's somewhere in that vicinity, I believe. And I do want to make the point, though, that moving forward, and I do agree that the individuals utilizing this area are compromised. Most of them are there to see a doctor. So we do have to do what we can to provide for a higher level of safety. I think this area will be there much longer than Fremont Hospital, where we have spent a tremendous amount of money not only lighting a crosswalk, but we pillowed the crosswalk at that location. And any improvements we can make, whether they be incremental changes, but when we see the need, we need to be ready to move forward with changes to this location.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, business from City Council. City Council reports. Councilmember Buckland.
On last Friday, I was invited to attend a couple of courses out at River Valley High School and present to their life management classes run by Mrs. Cindy Geddes, and certainly engaged with a lot of the students there just on the everyday aspects of volunteerism, and also presenting some of the different committees and things that our youth can be involved in Yuba City. So it was a worthwhile event. Coming up here between now and the next our next meeting, a number of meetings with SACOG, just moving forward in the same committees that I've been assigned to down there. So they've left me on the same committees.
Wonderful. Councilmember Mon.
Have a housing authority meeting tomorrow at noon. A couple of things we're working on there, and then later on have a Yuba Center Transit Authority meeting with the councilman at the end.
Starkey.
Thank you. We're working on installing video cameras in the buses, and also making it safe in the park and ride parking lots. So good things happening. That's about all I have.
Okay, wonderful. Councilmember at the end. I think that's.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Craig Starkey. It's nice to meet you. I had the opportunity since our last council meeting to attend a Regional Arts Council board meeting. The Sierra Central Credit Union groundbreaking, which was pretty nice. They're going to put a great facility in and consolidate all their management people. Had the opportunity to attend the swearing-in ceremony for Assistant Chief Garcia. It was a great moment, and congratulations. You're going to do a great job. And this morning, I had the opportunity, along with Darren Gale, our Director of Economic Development, to attend Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs meeting where Dan Logue came and talked to us. It was most inspirational and informative. It's a shame you guys couldn't have been there. So, sorry about that. Other than that, that's about all I've been doing. Right. And it's Craig, C-R-A-I-G, S-T-A-R-K-E-Y. Thank you.
Memorize for the next meeting.
I made him a note.
Yeah. Vice Mayor Dukes.
I also attended the Sierra Central Credit Union groundbreaking and the swearing-in ceremonies for our new chief, Assistant Chief Jeremy Garcia. And then in addition to that, last Friday evening attended the Sac Metro Chamber Awards dinner in Sacramento, and represented the city there with the mayor. And also attended the Yuba Sutter Broadband Infrastructure meeting. This is a meeting about expanding wireless broadband into our community. And if you have issues with your broadband connection or the speed of your connection, they are doing a survey that will be turned into the CUPC to help us get additional funding for broadband in this area. And I believe we're going to make that available on our website. Is that correct, Mr. Darren? Or Darren Gill? All right. That's all I have to report at this time.
Wonderful. I received a letter from the Government Finance Officers Association. And basically what it is, City of Yuba City received the Government Finance Officers Award 15 years in a row for having a phenomenal, awesome, outstanding budget. So we did get the whole letter, and I don't want to read it in detail, but we did do a press release. It is on the city's webpage. But definitely a congratulations goes out to our finance department and Robin and everybody else who does a wonderful job with the budget on an annual basis. Also attended the Sierra Central Credit Union ground opening, 110,000 square feet, 3 phases. The first phase is going to start here pretty soon. Had a wonderful opportunity, believe it or not. We always talk about recreational stuff in this area, talk about hunting, fishing, so forth. Darren and I were invited to a hunt, but we went to the lunch instead with Dusty Baker. And Dusty, the former manager of the Giants, the Reds, the Cubs, was here in Gridley, and he's always here in Sutter County, pheasant hunting and stuff. So really, really down-to-earth gentleman, and got a chance to just visit with him one-on-one, just have lunch with him, and just shoot the breeze. And we did invite him back to Yuba City, and we are trying to set up some kind of a luncheon, because one of the things we want to try to do is bring some distinguished guests out of the area that we have contacts to, and have the lunches sponsored and have people within community attendees next to nothing. And Dusty Baker is definitely on one of them. And it was interesting. I said, do you want me to have my people talk to your people? And he goes, no, you just call me directly. I don't have those people anymore. So that was I thought was really neat. Also attended the Sacramento Chamber of Commerce dinner. Those dinners are always kind of nice because you get a chance to meet with the people out of the Sacramento area, but also the jurisdictions from Roseville, Rockland, the other mayors, and you're able to find out what Davis is doing, what the other our local neighbors are doing. And instead of just seeing them on one-on-one, I got a chance to visit with Doris Matsui, Congresswoman Matsui, and she was one of the gals instrumental on the flood protection, helping us out, even though she doesn't represent our area. Like I mentioned earlier, everybody knows the Sutter Basin, and it takes everybody, Congressman Garamendi, Congressman Barra, Congressman Matsui, it takes everybody to get a project pushed along. And every time that we've gone down in the hallway, she's stopped, gone out of her way, we walked with her in the elevators into the voting thing. What's going on in Yuba City? How's things going? What can we do for you guys? And just genuinely sincere person. So nice stuff there. I get a chance to do with her, visit and talk about our area. While you were away. No, just teasing. Again? No. I'm just teasing. That is all I have for the good of the business tonight. Thank you guys very much. Thank you to the Boy Scouts. I know that you guys could be doing something else on this Tuesday night other than being here with us, but we do really appreciate it. You are the youth, and the youth definitely is the future of our community, and some of you or all of you are already leaders of just being here. So as the council member, on behalf of the council and the mayor, thank you guys for being here and spending your Tuesday evening with us. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.